Alright, today I'm going to be doing a carb clean on a Yamaha V-star 650. This is a twin carburetor machine. Both of these carburetors are going to be nearly identical on the inside, so I'm just going to go through and show you one carburetor, not to waste your time. So I've got four Phillips screws on the bottom here. I'll go ahead and take this side apart, and this is going to be the throttle cable side. You see your throttle cable comes into here, runs around this mount here into these. We got a push and a pull here, and then when you pull that throttle or twist that throttle, it's going to open up that butterfly there inside your carburetor. So should have both of them opening at the same time. I'll show you how to sync these carburetors. We have your idle adjust here. Essentially what that is doing, this is a little drastic, but it's opening up that butterfly slightly when you turn your screw in, which is clockwise, and turn your idle up. So turning your idle down, it's going to shut those butterflies a little bit more. You're going to turn that counterclockwise. You never want to do that more than a quarter turn at a time, and you want to make sure your bike is warmed up when you go to do that. First thing I like to do, I've showed you a video on how to pull this carburetor off of the motorcycles. Check my channel for that. But we've got four screws down here on the bottom. These two screws here are going to be to drain your carburetors. If you want to drain it before you go into the winter, you can do that. That'll drain all the fuel that's in your fuel lines, and then drain your bottom bowls here. There's two little nipples here that need to have hoses hooked onto them. If they don't, that fuel will directly flow right onto your motor and will discolor your motor or strip the paint. So you want to make sure that you've got fuel lines on these hooked up so that that fuel will flow underneath of your motor. Keep track of where these how the idle screw, this idle adjust here, is held on, because going back together you want to put this mount the exact same way that you took it off. And here is your bottom bowl there. A lot of times they get stuck just from heating and cooling and the fuel, so you take a screwdriver, you tap on it, it'll kind of break that seal loose. And here's an O-ring. You want to make sure you inspect that, make sure that's in good condition, and make sure there's no debris sitting down in here. A lot of times dirt and grime and sand will sit here in the bottom of the carburetor when you have them pulled off. Then you start your motorcycle, and any kind of debris that's in here could potentially get sucked up and run through these jets here, which is not good. If it goes through your pilot jet, which is this one, your bike is going to have a hard time starting. It's the most common jet that gets gummed up, so make sure that is clean and free. You can blow through it and see through it. So pilot jet is here. It's going to be a long, skinny jet, and he's got a very small orifice in these. Again, you want to make sure that you can blow through it with carbon choke cleaner. I prefer this gum out brand. You can blow through it. Make sure you can see through it when you hold it up to light. Take compressed air and blow through it. Just make sure that you can see all the way through it without any blockage there. Your main jet is here. I like to use a little bit bigger screwdriver on your main jet. If you use too small of a screwdriver, you could round off the center of that jet there, so, or block any kind of fuel that's going to run through there. So main jet is here. Again, make sure you can blow through it, see through it. Holding up to light, you can use carbon choke cleaner or compressed air. These are a little bit of an unusual carburetor compared to some others. These, your needle from up above, and I'll go through that here in a little bit, but your needle is going to run into this port here. So your fuel flows through your main jet up through this main jet holder here, and when your slide is open, or your needle is open, it will suck fuel up. So I like to pull this. It's a 6mm bolt here, and pull it. It's a brass plug here that you got to pull, and I just like to make sure that that's clean and free, and you can see your needle down in there, and that's coming from up here. So that needle goes all the way down to here. So this is actually capped off because that fuel has got to flow through this main jet here, but you want to make sure that you've got a brass washer on there and then your plug there. So again, make sure you can blow through that with compressed air. I like to actually pull that needle and that slide out before I blow through this port here, so you don't slam this needle up into the diaphragm area. And again, I'll show you that here in a little bit. Next, you pull this pin out here. We'll clean out where your fuel flows through here. This is your float. Pull this pin out here. Fuel is going to flow in here, so this is coming directly from your fuel petcock there. It's going to flow through here. There's a rail that runs right there and into your needle and seat area here. So we pull that pin, and then you can now pull that float off. You've got your needle that just dropped, and this has got a rubber tip on it. You want to make sure that that tip is in good condition. No debris stuck into that. Make sure it's not grooved, or sometimes that rubber tip there can fall off, so you want to make sure that that didn't happen. And to replace your seat here, small Phillips screwdriver here, and this seat will just pull out. And there's a couple O-rings or an O-ring on here that seals this up, so you want to make sure putting the new one in there that you press that down. Sometimes I'll put a little bit of lube on there just so it slides down properly, so fuel isn't leaking into the wrong area. If this is leaking right here in your seat area, your needle here won't shut your fuel off because that fuel will be directly running through this area here, and you'll flood your cylinder. So you want to make sure that that O-ring under there is sealed properly. Make sure that this isn't squared. Make sure there's no damage or debris down in your seat here. Again, blow through your port here, and that'll blow any kind of debris that's in that line out, and make sure that that's good and clean. So I'm going to put this back together while we're here. This is an adjustable float here, so you've got a tab here, a metal tab here that can be adjusted. You can put your needle on there. It doesn't matter which direction, just clip it on there so it sits like that. And I like to hold that needle and seat straight up and down while I put that in. So then you can take your pin, slide it through there. These are aluminum posts that this pin runs through, so you want to make sure you don't tap on these with a hammer or anything that could damage it. It should just slide in and out of there fairly easy. If it doesn't, you can take a small screwdriver, just tap on it just like that, but you don't want to get rough with these posts here because they will break. We've got your where your needle slides down into here. That's a 6mm cap. Again, don't forget that brass washer there. Snug that up. We've got your pilot jet that sits down in there farther. That's what your pilot jet looks like from the side there. Again, that's a small orifice jet, so make sure that that is clean. And sometimes I'll double check, triple check to make sure that that is completely free and clear. I've got orifice cleaner that you can use, that you can get from K&L. A couple other tool vendors will sell those Carb jet cleaner tools. Got your main jet, and that main jet holder can be pulled out as well. It's an 8mm main jet holder. You can unscrew that, but typically that main jet holder is a pretty large orifice because that fuel is controlled by your main jet there. That main jet holder is a larger orifice, and so if your main jet is cleaned out, then a lot of times your main jet holder will be cleaned out. So you do want to double check that though. Slide your bottom bowl on there, and make sure that the O-ring is good, remember that. And then your idle screw there. And then the holder of it goes on this side here. So those screws are typically a little bit longer. So you want to make sure you put the correct screws back in. Your other carburetor is going to be identical to that. So if you need to clean that, you can reference this video. I didn't think there was any sense in going through both of them when they were both the same. So the top is also going to be the same, and I'll show you that here in a little bit. So flipping this carburetor over now, we'll do the same side here. We've got some wires that we need to move out of the way. Those are for the heat sensors there. And we've got, again, 4 Phillips screws. These are small screws, so make sure that you've got a good screwdriver to pull these in and out. If you don't have a good screwdriver, you will damage those, and you'll have to put a pair of vice grips on these screws. It just takes a little bit of time to do that, kind of a hassle. So if you do have to get vice grips, I suggest replacing those screws. I like to keep my thumb over top of this. This has got it's spring loaded underneath this, not a stiff spring. But if you keep your finger on top here, it just kind of keeps everything intact until you're ready to pull it apart there. We've got your top cap here, your spring here, and your slide, which you can take with your finger and just push it out. Be really careful when you do that you don't rip that diaphragm. A lot of times these get stuck down in this groove here. You want to make sure that you can take it out without damaging it. These diaphragms aren't cheap, and you don't want any sort of leak at all. Any kind of crack, any kind of even minor hole will cause your bike not to run right. So slide that up then, and we've got your diaphragm out of there. Again, inspect it really good. To remove your needle, you've got a flat screwdriver, you've got a cap in there that's just threaded, a threaded plastic cap in there. You can loosen that up, and then I like to take and hold that needle with this hand because, well, if you're gonna tip it over, hold that needle, otherwise you're gonna have parts falling off out of there. So take a small pair of pliers then, pull that cap off of there. Underneath that is a spring with another plastic cap. And underneath that then is your needle. And this needle has another spacer, a plastic spacer down below there. Below the clip there, that's got a tab on there. You can see down in your slide there where that sits. So you want to make sure that that goes in that order. Make sure that that tab goes down to where it's supposed to go. You shouldn't be able to spin your needle around. That tab should hold that needle from being spun around there. Grab the spring with the little plastic spacer on there, and the cap we can just kind of drop down in there, and then you can take and screw that on. Make sure that that's screwed on there in the correct spot, so that you're not stripping out those threads. All right, we've got that plastic cap on there. Now going back in here, you want to make sure that tab there goes into the tab over here. And I like to take and press that down so it's like an umbrella there. And I take my other finger there, put it underneath here to kind of hold that slide up until we get everything in position. And then also make sure that needle slides directly into that main jet holder there, that center orifice. You could, if you don't want to force it in the wrong position there, so it won't go down if that needle is not lined up. So if you've got carbon choke cleaner or fuel on this diaphragm, it expands it, and so you want to make sure that it's dried out. Maybe set it in the window in the sun and let that dry out a little bit. You can take and push that down. I still keep my finger underneath that because when you put your spring in there, it'll push that slide down. A lot of times that'll pull that diaphragm out of place there. So take your top cap then, set it on there, and then still keeping my finger down below there, line those 4 holes up. A lot of times you can kind of feel it fall into place. And then I like to keep my finger underneath of that slide just so it doesn't pull that still out of place. So take and get a couple screws in there. I like to get at least 3 screws in there before I take my finger off of there. After I get this cap on here, I want to show you the air fuel screw in the order that it is put in. All right, now the air fuel screw on this one is on the top here. You want to make sure that those are adjusted to what your manual says. And to adjust those, you basically screw them all the way in, so clockwise, until they're completely seated. Count how many times they're in, so that's half turn, 1, half, 2, and a lot of times they're in that 2 range. So we've got 2 screws out, or 2 full turns out on this model is where it needs to be. And to pull it out and clean it, just unscrew it completely. And then keep track, there's a very, very small washer on here, a small spring, and a small O-ring. So you want to make sure that those don't get lost. And a lot of times that O-ring and that that little washer will stay in there. And that O-ring is going to stay in there. And it's still good, no air leaks there. So I'm not even going to pull it out, but it goes O-ring, and then this little washer there, you can just drop that in, but you do want to make sure that it's seated properly before you put your air fuel screw in. Then once you see that that's seated properly, grab your spring, set that in there, and then your air fuel screw can go in. And again, screw it all the way in until it's completely seated, and then take and screw it out. So we're going to go all the way in with it. And it doesn't have to be tight. Again, it's a brass fitting, so it doesn't have to be tight. Half turn, 1 1/2, 2. So 2 turns out. So that is carburetor on a Yamaha V-star 650. This is the TPS. I wanted to point that out. and that is adjustable. I suggest taking it to the Yamaha factory to adjust it. It's got tamper-proof hex screws on here, and they put tamper-proof on there for a reason. They don't want just anybody adjusting those. So make sure, maybe we'll do a separate video on how to adjust this TPS. If you want that, make sure and leave that in the comments below, and we can do that on this model. If you've got questions or comments, leave those below. If this video has been helpful, please subscribe, like, and share. Thanks a lot for watching.